Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice big 14 game slate on the docket for you. We have a lot of big teams playing, a lot of good situations for stacks. We have Cleveland, Boston. We have the Chicago White Sox, Toronto, the Yankees, the Mets, Texas. I mean, all these teams are just in really good spots against really bad pitchers. So there's plenty of options available. Even Kansas City's in a pretty decent spot against Waka, who I like to target a lot of times. Um, there's a lot of good options there. And before I get into the players themselves, I just want to shout out and say thank you guys for liking, commenting, and subscribing. Really do appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed yet, feel free to hit that button below to the right if you don't mind. That just helps the channel out. With that said, let's go and get into the players themselves. So at pitcher on FanDuel, obviously we can only put one guy here. And so that really limits, we have to make a decision about who we want here. And really, we have four people to choose from. First of all is Justin Verlander. Now, Verlander's been hurt, but he's supposed to come back. He projects the highest of any pitcher on the slate for me. I have him right over 41 fantasy points if he does, in fact, play, assuming he's not on a pitch reduction or anything like that, which it's hard to know if he'll be until tomorrow or until closer to pitch rather. He projects nearly over 40 points in this particular matchup, and he's been scoring 58 points last time against Oakland, and then his Ks should also, if he gets a bunch of strikeouts, which he usually does, he's going to have the potential to really score a lot of points and kind of shield himself from if he gives up a couple earned runs or something in the process. So I think he's a really good spot against Oakland, who's just not a good team at all. You can see here where he scored 58 points and had 10 strikeouts recently against them. So if he does play, I think he's probably the top player on this slate. The second guy is Robbie Ray. He's almost looking as good as Verlander. He's had 3 games against the Angels this season, and all 3 of those games he's scored 58, 52, and 52 points and had 10 strikeouts in each one. So he has massive upside in this matchup. He's definitely somebody you got to take a look at, especially if you're worried about Verlander. I think if you don't like Verlander, you've got to go with Robbie Ray if you're going to pay up for a top tier pitcher. He's pretty safe too. He has only had a couple bad games. I mean, he had a 21-point game against Atlanta and a couple bad games against Houston. Basically, since July, the beginning of June, excuse me, he's only had bad games against Atlanta and Houston. Everybody else he's been dominant against. And the Angels are not a team that's a big threat. They have 2 guys that can hit, with Trout and Ohtani, and that's about it. So overall, he's a great option in this particular slate. Then the next guy to consider is Max Fried. He's been really good and consistent lately. He's only had a couple little mini mishaps, but nothing like completely crazy. He had 18 points against Colorado, 24 points against the Mets. But overall, he's been really solid. He is facing a bit of a tougher team than Verlander or Reyes going up against. But his upside here is probably 40 fantasy points. And he's had about 35 fantasy points against Philadelphia this season. So I think he's in a pretty good position. He's not as strikeout heavy as Verlander and Ray tend to be, but he's still in a good spot. And I think he's somebody you have to consider because a lot of times he'll go deep in the game as well, which definitely gives us an advantage on this particular site. Then the fourth guy is somebody that you can work down to pay, to save money, and that's Lucas Giolito for Chicago White Sox. Now, obviously, he's not as good of a pitcher as the top 3 guys, but when you're trying to pay down, you got to find value. You're not going to have a top tier, pitcher all the time. With him, he's got good upside in this matchup against Detroit, and he's averaged 30 fantasy points against them this season, including a 36-point game, a 29-point game, and a 30-point game. And he's the best way you can save money at this position on FanDuel. There's really nobody else that matches up really well and has, consistently good games against a particular team that they're going up against and actually has the potential to score, 35 or 40 points. I don't really love Giolito, but I think that he's somebody you have to take a look at, especially if you want to save some money to pay up for some other players. So that's pretty much what I have at pitcher. One guy I would also mention, just to mention him, is Dustin May, but he's been really bad the last 2 games. He is going against San Francisco, which is a plus matchup for him, but he's still a little bit risky just because of the hadn't been good lately. Anyhow, let's go and get into the catchers and first baseman. So here we go. We got Vlad Guerrero Jr. He's averaging about 9 fantasy points a game the last 10. He hasn't been quite as good, but he's always a home run threat, and he finally hit one the other day, and I think that'll hopefully jumpstart him. He even got a stolen base the last game, so I think he's in a great spot in this particular matchup against Baltimore. Then we have Pete Alonso for the Mets against Mitch Keller, who's just not very good a lot of times. And he's somebody he's been hitting the ball extremely well, averaging almost 11 fantasy points a game last 10. Then we have Freddie Freeman for the Dodgers against Logan Webb. Now, they're playing in San Francisco, so that does limit a little bit. But he's been averaging 18 fantasy points for the last 10 games, so he's hard to dislike regardless because he's been hitting home runs and stuff like that. And even if he doesn't hit a home run, he's got potential to do a lot of stuff. The next guy I like here is Josh Naylor. Let's see here, Josh Naylor. He's been averaging about 9.3, 9.2 the last 10 games. He's had a couple of bad games, but he's a little bit boomer bust, but he's in a big old plus matchup against Minnesota, and so I really like him as a potential home run threat. Josh Bell has also been playing about 9.6 last 10, and he's got a nice plus matchup here. A little bit boomer bust, but he's also a guy that you can save some money with, and I think he's in a good position against Arizona. Then we have Salvador Perez for Kansas City. Now, I really like getting guys against Michael Wacha for the Boston Red Sox. I always feel like I do pretty good against him when I pick specific players. I know he's got a good ERA and stuff, but he doesn't tend to do that well against very specific players. And Salvador Perez is the type of guy I like to get up against him. And then finally, Kirk for Toronto. Now, obviously, if he's hurt, which I think he's going to play, but if he is hurt, then look for his backup, which is Jansen, as another option, and he's usually pretty inexpensive too. He's almost exactly the same price. He's been playing pretty well as of late as well. So that's what I have at catcher and first base. There's not as there's a lot of really good options, so it's hard to. There's not a whole lot of depth though at that from that perspective. Like usually first base has just a laundry list. I don't feel like it's that way today. But at any rate, at second base we have Jose Altuve. He's a top play. He's been averaging 13 fantasy points a game last 10. He's had a couple duds, but overall he's a home run threat every time he comes out. And against bad pitching, it's even better. He's going up against Adrian Martinez. So then we have Brandon Drury for San Diego against Bumgarner, who I always like to target as well. He's averaging almost 10 fantasy points a game, and he just came back a day ago, and he had a couple hits in today's game, so I look for him to have a solid game tomorrow against bad pitching. Then we have Trevor Story, and obviously you have to check back to make sure he is playing today. He's absolutely been hitting well. He's averaging 11.7 fantasy points a game. Then we have Andres Jimenez. Let's see if I can find him here. Yeah, here we go. For Cleveland. I like him against. I don't think that Bailey Over is actually going to be the pitcher for the Twins, but I do like him against who should be the pitcher. Let's see here. Hang on, let me double check. Minnesota. Yeah, it's probably Anibal Sanchez, I think. So, regardless, either one, he's going to be somebody that's in play at this position. He's also very inexpensive, so you can help fit him in there if you definitely need to. Another guy I really like is Jeff McNeil. He's too cheap here on FanDuel, really, probably because he doesn't tend to hit as many home runs, but he's still averaging 10.9 the last 10, and so he's somebody you can definitely fit, with this price point. Of course, a lot of people are probably going to like Max Muncy for obvious reasons. He's been hitting the ball extremely well, averaging 16 fantasy points a game for the last 10. Now, he is in San Francisco, so that does take a little bit off because it's not as easy to have him run there, but he's still a top-tier option in this matchup anyway. Then we look at Tommy Edman, who's just way too cheap for his production. He's starting to come up a little bit, but he's still too cheap. He's averaging 12 fantasy points the last 10 games and looks in a great spot against Cincinnati. At third base, we have Devers for Boston. against Kansas City's bad pitcher, Heasley. I really like him, and he's not that expensive for for his production. He's averaging 12.3 fantasy points a game, and he just looks like he's in a plus matchup. Jose Ramirez is another guy I like here, only he's a little bit more expensive, but he's been hitting home run finally after having a little bit of a drought, and he's averaging 12 fantasy points a game for the last 10. He's a little bit boomer bust though, so just be aware of that. For Bobby Witt, I really like him in the matchup. Overall, though, he hasn't been hitting quite as well, but he is still in a good spot, and he's averaging 10 fantasy points a game. The next guy I like here is Manny Machado for San Diego. I really like San Diego today against Bumgarner. He tends to give up. Now, he has been in a slump, but he's had a couple games where he's gotten some hits, and if he can so he's kind of due, and so I look for him to have a game where he gets going again here pretty soon. Austin Riley, unlike Matt Olson, who's literally batting absolutely zero almost, he's actually hitting pretty good. He's been hitting a couple home runs at least, and he's in a really great matchup here where he has an opportunity to hit a home run again. Then we have Brandon Drury for San Diego. He's in a great spot. Well, I already mentioned him against Arizona. I really like that guy. And then Alex Bregman for Houston. Now, he's a little bit more expensive, but I still think he's in a good spot. He's been averaging 10 fantasy points a game. A lot of good options at third base. Not as much value there as at most of the other positions, so you might want to try to pay up at that particular position. But you should be able to get some guys mixed around to help you pay for that with value, especially in the outfield and shortstop and first. So at shortstop, we have Bobby Witt Jr. already mentioned, and then we have Xander Bogaerts. I always butcher his name. I don't know exactly how to say it, but anyhow, he's just absolutely tearing up the ball at 13.7 fantasy points a game last 10. Francisco Lindor is somebody I really like today for the Mets. He's averaging 11 fantasy points a game. He's a little bit boomer bust, but I still think he's in a great spot. Bo Bichette has absolutely just crushing the ball. 24 fantasy points a game for last 10. His price has come up a lot, obviously, which does make it hard to roster him. But he is in a good matchup against Jordan Lyles, and so he's somebody to consider in that matchup. Excuse me. O'Neal Cruz, he's kind of been a tough matchup, but I still like him simply because he is, hitting the ball extremely well lately. Even though his batting average has been bad all year, he's starting to hit the ball, and so he's got some boomer bust potential here at a cheap price at shortstop. Then Willie Adames, Adames, I guess, for the Brewers. He's averaging about 12 fantasy points a game, almost 13. I think he's in a great spot. Andre Jimenez, who I already mentioned, and then Tommy Edman, who I also mentioned. And then finally, my favorite option at this position, Elvis Andrus, who's averaging almost 17 fantasy points a game, if not a little bit more than that. He is absolutely just crushing the ball every single game he's doing something different. He's either getting a home run, or he's getting RBIs, or he's getting runs scored, getting a steal occasionally, just getting hits, doubles. Yeah, he's just doing a little bit of everything, trying to help his team. And I really like him in this particular matchup. So, as for outfielder, my top guy is Ronald Acuna. I think he's due for a big home run in this type of game situation against Ranger Suarez, where he's really going to want to hit it. And so he's been a little bit 8.6 last 10, but his price has come down a little bit, and he's in a pretty good spot. Then we have Yordan Alvarez, who's been absolutely hitting the ball well, 12.7 last 10. He's had some massive games lately. I think he's in a great spot for Houston. And then Kyle Tucker, another guy for Houston that's in a really good spot, averaging almost 17 fantasy points a game over the last 10. He's had 2 duds, but, he's been averaging just crazy amount of points, hitting home runs, hitting doubles, stuff like that. So, and RBIs. And Houston does tend to score a lot when they get crazy. Then we have George Springer for the Toronto against Baltimore. I really like him here. Now, he's a little bit boomer bust lately. He's averaging about 9 fantasy points, but he's still in flex position, so I think he's great. Stone Garrett's in a tough matchup, but he's been playing really well. He actually hit a home run against Blake Snell's team the last time Blake Snell pitched, and so I think he's in a great spot here in order to have an upside game again. And then Aaron Judge, I mean, have you seen how many home runs he's hitting? He's going up against a really bad pitcher in Adrian Hoser for Milwaukee, and just look at the points he's scoring. I mean, they're gonna. So at some point, people are gonna have to start walking him. I don't understand why they don't walk him more. A couple teams did, like Minnesota figured that out, but you know, I don't get it. Anyhow, he's somebody you can use, though he's super expensive, so be aware of that. Cedric Mullins is nice and inexpensive here against Toronto. He's actually kind of boomer bust lately, but he's averaging almost 12 fantasy points a game, and he's cheap. Same with Brandon Nemo, excuse me. He's in a good spot here. He's averaging 11.9, and he's got a really plus matchup here. He has been a little bit boomer bust, but he's still, the Mets need him to hit the ball well. I already talked about Josh Naylor. I got two more guys here. Eloy Jimenez for Chicago. I really like Chicago lately. They've been playing pretty solid. I enjoy watching their guys hit, and Eloy has been somebody that's hitting the ball really well. And then Alex Verdugo, for Boston. He's my last guy at outfielder. He has been a little bit more robust lately, but he is averaging 10 fantasy points a game. He's got a little plus matchup here, and he's been hitting the ball pretty well for the last month or so. So I think overall we have a really good slate. There's plenty of good options available. Really appreciate all you guys for watching the video and commenting and stuff like that. Make sure to join the Discord. We're having fun in there. We got some more people have joined, so it's kind of cool. It's still small, obviously, but it's the more people, the merrier. So feel free to join that if you would want to. And have a nice day, guys.